Hey, folks, it's Chris and David getting deeper into agile market entry. This session is on going after a tighter market to build up the bigger opportunity. Regardless of what size you are, you have to dig in small first. And Chris wrote this up, and so I really thought it was something I wanted to start with. Big and fast is a mantra. We all hear it. Hockey stick is a mantra. We hear it from leadership. We hear it from investors. We hear it from the media. But that's not typically how disruptive markets are built. And I would say 90% of the time, that's not how disruptive markets are built. You know, you can dig down deep into the Microsoft's history, Amazon's history, Facebook history. Hewlett-Packard was built in the garage with two guys on a table. So we know these. We know this stuff. Small is not only a better way to enter the market, but it's often the best path to big markets and opportunities. So Chris is really passionate about this. It also overcomes the challenges and disadvantages of going big out of the gate.
Yep.
So as part of this session, we love comments. We love questions. We love feedback. We'll pop your question up on top of the screen, and we'll engage that question. So don't hesitate to type in your thoughts and your comments. So Chris.
Yes, David.
So start us out.
Yeah.
You say something here about the gift that keeps giving.
Yes.
The small market equals big markets. What else? Get us started.
So like, you know, this is I run across this all the time, David. It's so common, and as you said, we're getting preached to it that we got to go big. The place I hear it the most, and it's dangerous, is from venture capitalists and the funders that, you know, and eventually getting big is obviously the goal for everybody.
Yes.
And that's what I head for. But to reach that goal, most times the going small, niche, is the best way to get to the big opportunity. And when I was pulling this together, I have some high level stuff of why this is so critical. But that's my.
You got a ton.
I got a ton. But as I started writing down all the reasons that and the benefits of it, they just kept falling out. It's kind of, as you said, a gift that just keeps giving. It's kind of endless.
No, you said that. You gave it to me to say. So you have these bullet points. So yes. Tell me about them.
So the first thing is that, and this is kind of the number one thing. And you and I talked about this 2 weeks ago. One of the things you have to do with the disruptive product that's really, really critical is you have to get into your market early and quickly. And you have to get that early traction. And by far the best way to do that is by going small and targeted. Yep. And the reason is, and here's what it is, when I'm looking to get into the market, I'm doing this with some customers right now, I'm looking to increase the delta, the difference between the pain of the problem, right, that they're having today, and the solution we're delivering.
Okay.
And when you go after big markets, that delta gets smaller. So when you go after smaller markets, you can extend that delta to where it's very broad. Here's a great example. I had a client I was doing some work with. They had a product for doing injectables, precision injectables.
Yeah, yep.
Yeah, delivering meds through a syringe with precision. And the data shows that if you get an injection, it can be plus or minus 10%. Yeah, exactly. That's
a lot.
The average, because of the inaccuracy of the measuring on the syringe and the drawback. And so, I mean, that's huge. That's a huge delta on, you're going in. And the customer, there was some obvious reasons why they wanted to go into the inpatient hospital setting that made a lot of sense. But the biggest and the most high profile use of meds in an inpatient hospital center is oncology, is for delivering chemotherapeutics. And we started doing a little research, customer discovery research, And we quickly found out that oncologists didn't care.
Yeah.
Plus or 10%, plus or minus 10%. They're trying to kill a disease in the body with poison. So a little bit, in this case, a little bit more, a little bit less, really didn't have an impact on.
So starting small would have helped out greatly because you could have learned that a fast failure.
Well, and that's kind of what we did. We did a fast failure on oncology just by doing customer discovery. We failed.
Yep.
Man,
so you did. So you used this model and you failed fast because you kept it small, and you looked and you really quickly you saw, oh my God, nobody's going to buy this in this space because of I'm delivering poison. I don't care how much poison I put in there, plus or minus 10%.
Pretty much that was the oncologist.
It scares the crap out of me because our insurance benefits from a company just increased by 10%. It's huge.
Yeah.
It's funny how the marketplace can take very logical thought processes and turn them around their head because you haven't seen it from another direction.
Very easily.
And so you're big on bottom up. And you've just read about the Uber story. So tell us the bottom up on the Uber story.
Well, let me finish this story real quick.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
So what we did find in the research we're doing is that there was a part of the hospital pharmacy that delivers drugs to peds, to infants, to newborns.
Okay, so then you pivoted personas.
We pivoted right in there, right in the discussions when we're doing the discovery, and what we found was, well, first of all, it's much smaller, it's much lower profile.
Yep.
Much, but difference in 10% up or down for some peds meds.
Yeah, that's huge, right?
That's a difference of life or death for certain peds meds. So now much smaller market, but what we did in focusing on was the pain, delivering meds accurately, and the benefit, possibly preventing a death of an inborn.
Yeah.
Now we have a huge potential value proposition. Now physicians were interested, the pharmacist was interested.
Yes.
The CEO, the CFO of the hospital were even interested.
Yeah, because malpractice and mistakes litigation is huge, and that's huge. The amount of money you can save. I love that story. Pivot fast, small, pivot fast, fast failure, jump in, bottom up strategy.
Yep. So that's
I'm sorry, keep going. I was going to say something.
But that's kind of the first thing. Let's focus in. Let's get that pain and solution delta, the difference between them up high. And what that allows you, and this is what we got into the last time we were talking, is that allows you to get into the market much quicker and much more efficiently.
What frustrates me, Chris, is I've been hearing more people talk about iterative funding. And so we both have been involved in startups, and the last one I was involved, it was lump sum funding, of course. And just like you talk about speed and put it all out there. But there has been a trend of iterative funding, which says, okay, let's look at your current situation, and we're going to give you this funding. So then you work bottom up, you look tight. Okay, what did you discover? Okay, I'll give you this funding, like a quarterly tranches of money, and then allow the team to test at a smaller level because they're not staring at a big pile of cash. And
honestly, David, that's brilliant because to be successful in these disruptive product launches, it's an iterative learning process.
You know how it's done naturally, but bootstrap with angel investors. So bootstrap angel investors will do that naturally. The basically checkbook is zero. And then, okay, where are you at right now? And then you'll get a tranche of money for the next payroll, or you get a tranche of money for the next iterative testing cycle. So it does happen there naturally. But yeah, the big investors, they haven't done it. There's some that do it, but most of them haven't done it that way yet.
And a lot of it comes back to this big, fast mantra that's out there.
Yep.
And for certain products, that works. But for truly disruptive products, as you said, 90% of the time, it just doesn't work.
And then we debated this too. And for me, the big company starts thinking, you have an entrepreneurship thing, you do it, and the big company, our brand will carry over to everybody.
Yeah.
So we're going to launch big, fast, and then you talked about the repeatable sales process that the big companies then try to shove it in there, and then it becomes a complete death spiral, as we talked about before.
Exactly, and that's what we're talking about. This early stage is just getting the entry into the marketplace. Mm-hmm. But once you get to the entry, then you got to go through the learning process to get the repeatable sales. So if you do that big push and you push it out, I was talking to a friend about this recently. He's in a big company. And they had to disrupt the product that they pushed out to the sales force a year ago, and they're just struggling getting traction.
Yeah.
And it's the same
because
problem.
people don't realize if you have 10 salespeople and you miss, how much time it takes for those 10 salespeople that you have to make them feel better, get them calmed down. How about if you have to do a pivot, how hard it is to try to pivot 10 people? All right, did you hire, and we're going to do another session coming up about cowboys and renegades associated with who drives this process. They're not. And so, yeah, it's just there's so much logic around why this fails.
Well, David, and that's a brute. That's it's not only do they struggle and they lose faith and they lose trust, but you lose them. You literally lose them.
Oh God, they check out. See you, peace out. What's my next job? Call the recruiter.
Yep. Or if they have multiple products in their product line, they go to what they're comfortable. If they don't have early wins, and then you lose any opportunity around the product. That's kind of the same thing that happens with the customer. If you don't get out to the first early customers and really get adoption and get thrilled customers, you lose the market too.
I can't wait till the next one because we're going to talk about disruptive hunters.
Yeah.
Disruptive hunters. Okay, so let's go again now. We get it.
Yeah.
Better to start small, and I'm still going to have you do the Uber story, but at another point.
Yeah,
especially for disruptive tech. So why? What are the benefits? You're telling me.
The first one is one we're talking about. So it gets us into the market quicker. So we go small, we get the delta, we tap into a market pool instead of trying to push that product into the marketplace. Now we get some early adoption, we get some early traction. We're now in the market with some success. And if we can get to a repeatable process in that small niche market quickly, we can start scaling that market. So you can now push that niche out to a broader sales team and start scaling into the smaller market. And that's kind of the first step. And but there's all sorts of other benefits.
But the big thing of the revenue wins, let's go back to that, because I'm telling you, revenue wins is a inspirational firecracker. Well, I even say an inspirational M80 for those folks that like to throw crazy fireworks. I mean, it just pops everything. It just fires everybody up. It just makes people more excited.
Yep.
And and I think having that tighter team, you're able to get to revenue faster, like you're talking about. And so let's go to the you recently learned about Uber. So talk about the cold start here at this point.
So it's a book I've been reading. These practices that you and I talk about, I've been doing them for the last 20, 30 years. But I actually picked up a book called The Cold Start recently and realized that this is how Uber started. And it was really interesting. And I wrote this down. I want to read it because how niche they got was incredible. And theirs was geographically speaking. So here it is. So they got so nichey that this is what it looked like. Their target market was 5 p.m. at the Caltrain station at 5th and King Street. That was how finite they got. That's how small they got.
Well, talk about Facebook. Keep going. I'm sorry. Keep going.
But that way now they're focusing on such a small market that they can address a problem. People getting off the train after work and having to get home, and they can drive a solution. So now they have they don't have to wait 20 minutes or 30 minutes, which was early on was common with Uber. They'd only wait 5 or 10 minutes, and they had Uber there, and they could get instantly home. So they by focusing in and getting narrow, they increase this delta between the problem getting home and then getting a ride to get there. And then
when I talk to big companies a lot, or people who have, so here's what happens in a lot of cases with small entrepreneurs too. They talk to comps of these big companies that have already been established, and the people there talk about what they're doing now. They don't talk about what they did to get there.
Well,
I keep telling this one gentleman, I'm like, talk to him about how they started.
Yes.
Not where they're at now.
And that's what I love about the Uber story. I didn't know about Uber. You probably didn't know about Uber until they were at least national.
Yeah.
So it looks like they've been this big company. They're at scale, but
no, they were around for.
Dig into the roots of it. The very beginning, they started this very targeted, very niche, very small. Figured out how to make that repeatable, and then they scaled that repeatability over and over and over again.
I did that at ASPE. I mean, I started with a small segment of the STLC marketplace,
Yep.
learned, and those people talked to us, and we spread. And I didn't go to some of the bigger conferences until 5, 6, 7 years in our life cycle because I was still testing and figuring out and adjusting and pivoting. And as I always talk about, that company is built on the bones of 1,000 failures.
Yeah.
Honestly, man, it's crazy.
And you've
What's
done
that?
it, I've done it over and over again. But that's just kind of the one benefit of starting small.
I love these benefits you got here.
Okay, you want me to go through some of them?
I think people should be writing them down. And here's the other skinny is please give us comments, thoughts, perspectives. Don't hesitate to throw that at us while we're going here. So Chris, let's hit these 9.
Okay.
1.
So we got the one, which is it gets in the markets quicker and faster and more efficiently. The second one is shorter sales cycle. When the pain goes up and the benefits go, when you increase that delta, your sales cycle gets shorter. You're not convincing people. You're already solving a problem that's critical to them.
Yeah, you found it. You hit it.
Oh
my gosh.
You naturally, what happens in the environment, sales cycles get quicker. People make quicker decisions. It allows you, the other thing it does, and you and I've talked about this, is that you can't get to scale until you get repeatability. So the other thing about going small is it gives you the time to learn. We've got small markets, we're focused, we know who we're going after. Now we can drive that person all the way through the sales process, right on through the adoption process, and we have time to learn.
What about staying under the radar?
So this one is really... So, and you just talked about it, what you did. What was the name of the company?
At ASPE.
At ASPE. When you go small like that, you don't get the attention of the competition in the marketplace. So you stay under the radar. One of my biggest pet peeves is these big launches at big meetings with big booths. Basically, you're just telegraphing to the competition that you're coming at them.
Yeah.
And and it's when you're just launching a product, so you still have this whole learning process to be effective in the marketplace. And you just given them, you just told them you're coming out, but you still have 6-9 months of learning to go through. So the other thing about being small is, a great example was that the peds market for the syringe, that's a small part of the hospital that the big vendors aren't selling into.
Yeah, and if you did it too big, people will start laughing at you.
Well, that's part of it, but the thing that I love about David is that the big guys don't even pay attention to you when you're that small.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
They're not looking at those markets. So you get to stay under the radar while you're learning and you're figuring out how to scale that market. And once you get to the point where you're ready to scale and you go big in the competition that already knows you, that's the other benefit of doing it is, you've kind of know how to exploit, scale, and drive value into that marketplace and execute efficiently before they even know you're coming. And that's one. Then
you get that repeatable process.
What's that?
Tell me about lower marketing costs.
So lower market costs. So you go after a small market. You can go after with a small team with very targeted efforts, with very efficient marketing. Both sales and marketing, so you can keep your costs down. I'm doing this. We're building out a go-to-market plan for a company, a client of mine that's in the med tech space. They've got a optical imaging tool for diagnostics of the eye, of the retina. And we had 2 potential markets to go after. One is the optometric market, and the other one is the retinal specialist market. Well, the optometric market is $40,000. The retinal specialist is only $2,000. All things being even, it's much easier, much less expensive to go after a 2,000 potential client market, prospect market is a 40,000. Very different marketing campaigns, very different size sales efforts, very different size marketing efforts. So that's the other advantage. By going small, you can be much more efficient in those early days when you're learning. So that's the other one. And the other thing by going small, this is interesting, is that viral thing that we're all looking for, that word of mouth that takes off. When you go to these small networks, in this case, retinal specialists, they tend to be they talk and they all know each other because they're so small. So word of mouth tends to be. I was just, my sister's a pediatric ophthalmologist.
Yep.
And I was just chatting with her. It was her birthday over the weekend, and she spent the weekend up in New York City at the American Academy of Pediatric Ophthalmologists, her annual meeting.
Mm-hmm.
She knows everybody there. It's just
Yep.
such a small community. So that not only is it less expensive to go to small markets, but to get the viral effects,
Yep.
you get there much.
And the hunter can go in there and talk and communicate, and they have a specialized message and really work it too. I love that aspect. And that ties back to being a big player in a small pond.
Exactly. And the big player in small pond is one I love because especially when it's a disruptive product and no one else is solving this particular problem. When you go after small markets, you can actually look a lot as a very small company or as a very small early effort. You can look much, much, much bigger. The other thing is you can, in small ponds like that, you can find leverage points that you can support the virality of that market. And in small, that's very difficult to do in big ponds where all the big players are playing.
I like it too because you can go at the heart, especially in your medical side, the med tech side, and the bio side, the heart of the people. You can hit the scientists, you can hit the doctors when you're doing this in their ponds, like you just talked about with your sister. I mean, that's where the rubber meets the road. Like you said, that's where you'll find out whether someone really they're going to use it or not. And that's very powerful. Sometimes people get mixed up and go too high if they're going too wide and not too tight.
Yeah, there's lots of disadvantages of going too wide and too wide. One is
too high. I still think there's advantages going too high in this process as well, because there's a clouded understanding of what is really going on the ground floor.
That's the problem with going high. If you all of what you and I are talking about that's unique about disruptive products is all this early learning has to happen right at ground level.
Yeah, ground level.
It works from the ground level on up. You can't do top-down efforts. It just doesn't work because
a lot of times they don't know they have no idea what's going on.
For the top-down, don't, but also to be effective and to get into the adoption of your technology into their everyday life, where what I call normalization, where it becomes the normal way of doing things, that all happens at the ground level. It happens with the surgeon in the operating room with the scrub nurse. Yeah, that's where it's happening. It's not happening with the chief of surgery.
Yeah,
that's not
or the director of the hospital, or one of the board members of the hospital, or some stuff like that.
No, it's not happening. Now, if that's when you're a big player, when you're a big player in the small pond, when you have that type of leverage and you start solving big problems,
then they'll be communicated up the chain.
You can make that leap from the ground level to the top level.
But it's got to tie back to money. So at the end of the day, is it more efficiency, or are you driving big savings and big insurance protection?
And you have to prove all of that out at the ground level before you can make that leap. But what ends up happening when you go after these small markets solving these big problems, you can make that leap. So then, and I'm getting ahead of myself here a little bit, but we can talk about kind of what the end game benefit of going.
Let's go to that, because the last two are staying lean and lowering risk, both of which you talked about as part of the benefit.
Yeah.
So let's go into that. So anything else? Give me it. The biggest benefit.
So you and I have laid out a bunch of benefits here, 7, 8, 9 of them.
Yeah, but you have a hit. You have a homer here you want to deliver. Deliver, baby.
The grand slam one is that the best way to get really big is by going small. And why I say that is once you're in the market having this level of impact that we're talking about, seeing how to expand the market and what the next, where the leverage points are to expansion, you then you're at the kind of the cutting edge of what's going on in that market, and you get visibility into seeing where those expansion places are. I've done this. I did this. We started a company in the genomic space selling into academic and government research labs, and then small biotech and small pharma. And we established, and we went against players that had raised 10 times the amount of money as us. We raised $4 million. They were raising 50, 60 million bucks. At the end of the day, we won by using these tactics, but we penetrated this market solving a very specific small piece of the market problem. But once we were there, we saw the opportunity to get into to go from the discovery side of drug development to the clinical side, which is where all the big CROs in the world have built themselves, is by enabling the clinical and outsourcing. And we were able to, by doing all this work that we did, by staying small and lean and leveraging our position in the marketplace, we're able to see where the opportunity was to be able to get into the clinical side. And when that happened, we were positioned to be the leader.
Funny, at the one of the latest startups I was at, we actually had a false positive of revenue, because we started driving revenue and driving unit sales and driving engagement, but we knew it, but we thought we could beat it.
Yeah.
The cost of apathy and the CAC, the overall cost of acquisition. We were battling apathy. So we knew the marketplace, we knew the people, we didn't realize the level of apathy. And because of that, our cost to get these folks was high. We thought it would go down, and it didn't. But that ultimately helped the organization pivot, but it could have been done with less burn.
Yeah, and that's exactly, I've seen that same scenario happen lots of times, Dave. And where I see that you've got to close the full loop on the product launch, and when we're doing sales, we tend to focus in on the sales process, which is getting leads in, qualifying those leads, getting the close, and then passing them off and getting to the next sale. When I say close the whole loop, that's just the sales process. To have an effective, repeatable sales process, you got to go through the adoption piece of it, which is where you probably ran into the apathy piece eventually.
Yeah. And then also from there, we found other elements where the customer lied. So it's so interesting when you're deep down. We weren't at ground level. We were selling at a high level. We were selling through portals and things like that. We weren't going to PTA groups or going to places where parents hung out to truly hear. And what it became an issue of charging. And Dave, as part of that,
this is the problem with disruptive products. When you're truly disrupting, you've got to really understand how the buying decisions being made, and then the utilization and the adoption decision is being made at the individual customer level.
Here's the challenge, Chris, and we'll talk about this with cowboys, renegades, and crazy people, is there's an emotional element to this. Like when I was deep in the weeds on that, logically I just kept thinking we could solve.
Yes.
You want to win. Yes. And, I kind of started fall in love with the fact that we were figuring things out.
Yes.
But then it hit me. But there are some, it hit me about, okay, this isn't going to work out. There's too much apathy. We're not going to beat the CAC. We're not going to be able to. There are other pivot points here. This isn't the way to go.
Yep.
But also when you're in that, if you're not the money controller, it's hard to stop, right?
So you and I talked about this in previous ones. This is a mindset change, and you have to have a top-down buy-in to this.
On the mindset side, as it relates to
discovery versus execution. We had this conversation before. If you don't have that belief, then you can't make the pivots you have to make. And the question is, Dave, that scenario you just talked about, there's a good chance you can't avoid having to go through those learnings. You probably did. The key is, what's the experiment you can do to keep your costs down and your time down to go through that learning?
Then have the cash to be able to.
And that's where you probably could have made some big impact. You probably could have gotten to that end answer.
Well, they did ultimately. They did. They needed more cash to do it, and they figured they've been pivoting again. It just required more cash. And rightly so in some cases, but this is the interesting thing about the human side of this, especially with the disruptor, that person who's going in and doing some of the nitty gritty work that we're going to talk about next session.
And you really have to be listening to your people doing that nitty gritty work, and you have to be listening to the consumer at that level, because that's where all the answers lie. And a lot of times that in our corporate culture, that gets drowned out, and we start interpreting it and not really hearing it. Yep. Yeah. interpreting. Yes, exactly.
You know what I'm saying? That's the
Yeah,
fact
exactly.
that, and then expanding upon a piece that you saw, and then building up this whole narrative based on one small piece.
I
see
had
that
a
all the
friend of
time.
mine used to call that happy years. You get a little piece of good data and you listen with happy years. You got to be very critical. And
it's almost like creating fan fiction on your customers.
What's that?
It's almost like creating fan fiction on your customers.
You're absolutely doing that. And there's, human nature. We want to do that, but that's where this mindset, it's cliche now, but fail fast, but it's right. But holding that mindset of failing fast and holding yourself true to that is very challenging.
It's really good to practice it. Maybe we can start building it, skills, practicing it in people's home businesses. Like your home, your household. Because you can start practicing that in the household, testing something out with your own money. You're going to learn how to fail fast very quickly if you're using your own money.
Oh, that's an interesting point. Well, you and I are doing that. You and I do that regularly.
I know. Yeah, absolutely,
I mean,
you do. Yeah, you're doing those tests with your own money in your own business and your own house.
That way, you and I are doing that right now today.
Well, man, this has been great, Chris. Thank you so much. And we dug deeper into the agile market entry mindset, the utilization of that system that Chris has invented to get out and figure out how to get disruptive products out smarter and faster so you don't lose the opportunity, which a lot of companies do. And we'll talk next time about, Cowboys, Renegades, and...
Cowboys, troublemakers, and rebels.
Rebels. Add renegades to it because I like that too.
Renegades, rebels. Those are the people you want. Those are the people you want on your product launch team, and we'll talk about why.
Well, thank you all for participating. We look forward to seeing you on the next session. Bye.
Bye, everybody.